The 911 ST is the latest car in the already very extensive 911 lineup, and Porsche says this is the most driver-oriented car they've ever produced. But I'm here as a 911 and a Lotus Elise owner to tell you that that is a flat-out lie. You see, Porsche screwed up with this one. Not on the design of the car, because the specs are actually wonderful, but they messed up in saying that it's for true purist drivers. And even though I've made plenty of mistakes over the years, Porsche usually doesn't. Now, there's a great quote that I love that says, "Cars are boring, it's what you do with them that makes them interesting." So even though it makes me sad that a whole bunch of 911 STs are probably going to end up in collections and become low mileage time capsules, the real joy, I think, of a car comes from driving it. A car is a dynamic mechanical system. When it's parked, sure, it might be a piece of art, but the real fun is in using these things. So, by that logic, I say the 911 ST isn't for the real hardcore drivers of the world because it has two problems. First is its price. This thing ain't cheap. It starts at $291,000, but with just a few options selected, it jumps to over $300,000. And that's not even including any dealer markups. And given that this is a rare, limited production model, they're only going to be making 1,963 of them, there definitely will be dealer markups. That brings us to the second reason it's not really a driver's car, and that's its rarity. Being a limited production car means that a lot of these are going to end up in collections or only driven to Cars and Coffee on Saturday mornings. Maybe there are a few owners who are going to rack up a lot of miles on their ST, and I really commend them for that. But I suspect that that's going to be an exception rather than the rule. So just because it's expensive and rare, does that mean it's not a driver's car? Well, yeah, kinda. I mean, to me, a driver's car is not only a car that is extremely engaging to drive, but it's also a car that, because of its engagement, you're going to want to drive it a lot. I mean, if it's fun to drive, don't you want to maximize your fun? But on the other hand, if it's rare and expensive, you're probably going to actually drive it less. Maximizing the fun of driving is something that I feel like the Porsche community knows and understands. I did this other video on why 911s tend to have high mileage, and I explained how 911 owners love driving their cars. If you saw a Ferrari with 200,000 miles, you'd be utterly shocked. But in a 911, that's not uncommon. Porsche owners aren't allergic to miles, but I think the price and the rarity of the 911 ST are going to prevent people from driving this wonderful car a lot. Which is a shame, because this is a car with all the specs to make it a true driver's car. Porsche was correct in saying the 911 ST isn't a car for driving on the track, which for most of us realistically only happens a few times per year. So it's great that they focused on making this car fun to drive on the street at road legal or semi-legal speeds. Sure, the 911 ST is a lot faster than my Lotus, but it shares a similar philosophy of lightweight, good driving fundamentals, and being fun no matter how hard you're pushing. On public roads, even the fun, twisty ones, usually the limitation is actually the road, not the car. I've used my lowly 911S when driving with friends in GT3s, and guess what? I can keep up with them just fine. Sure, on the racetrack would be a different story, but on public roads you can't push the car to the limits, and the road is really the constraint on how fast you can go, not the car. Now, they say the 911 ST is sort of a successor to the limited edition 911R, and it shares some of its philosophy with the GT3 Touring. It's not going to be the fastest car around the racetrack because it doesn't have all the technology of a GT3 RS. But it will be fun to use in the other 90% of driving that you do that isn't on the track. The specs are certainly the right recipe for a driver's car, and let's look at what you've got. 518 horsepower naturally aspirated engine from the GT3 RS. Manual transmission. No goofy looking aerodynamics or a silly wing. Lightweight at about 3,056 pounds. It is 70 pounds lighter than the 911 GT3 Touring. It has fewer driver aids like rear wheel steering. Of course, it has a limited slip differential. It even has the option to get the more comfortable non-bucket seats, which, if you're driving a lot and putting a lot of miles on, might actually be a good choice. Although the 911 ST positions itself as sort of a bare-bones, simplified GT3 RS, the real car that probably fills that gap better might actually be the 911T. I know it sounds crazy. who would be cross-shopping a 911T, which is sort of on the low end of the 911 spectrum, with the 911 ST? Well, maybe someone who appreciates the experience of driving. Now, hear me out for a second. I don't think the 911 ST is tempting over the guys shopping for a GT3 RS or even a normal GT3, because both of those are pretty track-oriented, and the ST is not. So if you're a Porsche fanatic who loves to drive your car and you don't want to worry about the depreciation from high mileage as a penalty from actually enjoying this fine machine, what do you actually buy? Well, you might buy something that is less rare and isn't going to break the bank. Maybe a 911T, a 911S, or even a GTS with a manual transmission. Actually, wait a second. Can you even order the 911 range with a manual anymore? Okay, I just checked. And yes, you can still get any of the non-GT 911s with a manual. Of course, then you're going to miss out on that glorious GT3 engine, since both the 911T and the 911S and GTS are all twin-turboed now. But the low-end torque of those turbo motors is pretty intoxicating too, so they might not be a bad option. Or you could get a GT3 Touring. Sure, it's quite a bit more money than a 911T, but it's not actually limited production, so you can get one. And it's only 70 pounds heavier. Oh, and by the way, it's only 16 horsepower less than the ST. And you know what? The GT3 Touring actually even has a higher top speed at 199 miles per hour. The ST actually tops out at 186. So I guess the question really comes down to how badly do you need that naturally aspirated engine? And maybe that's where Porsche has you cornered. Because if you want a 911 with a naturally aspirated engine these days, your only options are the GT3 lineup or this new ST. But you know what? I might be a bit atypical, but I'd probably just opt for a used 911.1S with its naturally aspirated 3.8 liter and a manual transmission. Okay, it only has 400 horsepower, I know, but you can probably find one for around $70,000 these days, and you can drive the wheels off of it guilt-free on your way to 100,000 miles of smiles. You'll also be smiling because you have an extra $230,000 in your bank account. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments below if you'd pick a 911T, maybe a used naturally aspirated 911, a GT3 Touring, or this new 911 ST for your ultimate driver's 911.